We've been following 8BitDo for a while on this channel. We've seen the complete evolution of the SN30 going to the SN30 Pro, the SN30 Pro Plus, which is at this time still my favorite third-party controller to use pretty much on any system. And of course, 8BitDo also likes to get creative, for better or worse sometimes, right? We saw the controller with two D-pads that attempt to solve the issue with no R3 or L3 button by pressing the D-pad down, which wasn't my favorite thing, but I appreciate the creative effort. And now we have a successor to their Zero lineup, the 8BitDo Zero 2. It's the smallest controller that I've ever used, that I've ever even seen. So today, we're going to take a look at it. We're going to head over to the table here and take a look at them, talk about them, and also break them down and see what's going on inside. But first, a big thank you to our sponsor today, GameStop, and their Game Days sale. Now, let's say you're like most of us and you're still doing some last-minute Christmas shopping, but you don't want to spend a ton of money. Well, I like to look for a bunch of deals on different games that I can pick up, and GameStop has a ton of stuff right now on sale. They have a Nintendo Switch where you can buy it and you'll get a $30 gift card. So if you buy somebody the Switch, they can just get a gift card to go pick out a game. But one that I was really excited to see finally on sale, straight up brand new, is Jedi Fallen Order. I absolutely love this game. It was so much fun to play through this year, and it's currently $45 at GameStop. At this point, it might have a better plot than the movie. That one... Okay, yeah, that one hurt a little bit right here. All of the deals will be running up to the 25th, so you make sure you check out GameStop and their Game Day sale. I'll leave a link down below in the description. And once again, thanks to GameStop for sponsoring the video. So 8BitDo sent over two. We have a yellow and a blue 8BitDo Zero 2 controller. These are designed to be small. These are pretty much the most portable controllers that they have come up with. There was a Zero 1. This is just, I guess, the second one in that line. The idea here is these are controllers that you can literally attach to your keychain and take them with you. So they have eliminated quite a bit here, and it's not going to work for everyone just because of how small they are, but they do retail for $19.99 each, and we're going to take a look at them. I'm going to put the yellow one here to the side, and we're going to go ahead and check out this blue one. We'll go ahead and unbox it first, and as you can imagine, there's not a ton of stuff in here. I mean, you can see like the packaging, and then just compare the packaging to a Joy-Con controller. I mean, you can already kind of get an idea of how small this thing is inside just by doing that, and we'll compare it again. And then I also have a Pro controller for the Switch, because as you can see, this is kind of set up more or less for a Switch system, obviously, because of the color scheme. It's kind of after the Switch Lite color scheme. So we do have kind of a, I guess, a wrist or a strap that you can use for your system, I guess, if you would like. It'll attach there. That, of course, will attach to your controller, and then you have a small micro USB cable. It's very, very small, as you can see. Again, I guess it's meant to be portable, or they're just cutting costs on that part. It is unfortunately not USB Type-C. USB-C is something we've grown accustomed to now with the Switch, and I really want everything to be USB-C now, so we don't have to deal with this thing, right? Like, this feels like old technology now. So I do wish it was USB-C, but maybe, I don't know, that was cost cutting, or maybe form factor. Hard to say there. And then we have our tiny little controller right here. Now, they did put like a piece of plastic over the front, and that is because it is glossy plastic. And I'm not a huge fan of the front of a controller, or any real part of a controller, to be honest, being glossy. Mostly because, of course, glossy plastic will generally scratch fairly easily, and you're going to be handling this, and it's going to be attached to your keychain if you want, or in your pocket. This is something that will probably get scuffed up pretty well, and it's weird to me because the back is all like a matte finish, which I think would have worked all the way around, but I guess the design they wanted to go with was this glossy look. Not a huge fan of it. Now, the buttons are all matte. They're like a matte white, and it, again, kind of goes along with the Switch lights, kind of blue with the white contrasting buttons, or yellow, or I guess gray. From what I've seen, they have a blue, like this turquoise, and they have a yellow, and then I believe they also have a pink. They just sent over the yellow and the turquoise. And we can get a quick look around. It is a very basic controller when you really look at it. I mean, we have 2 shoulder buttons here, of course, which would be L and R, A, B, X, Y, and then we have a start and select, and then our D-pad. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that means it's going to be limited to only so many games that can use this, because you don't necessarily have a ZR or a ZL. There's not even a home button here, and yeah, you'd be right about that. I mean, consider games, I guess, like in the Super Nintendo app or the Nintendo app. This would work. It has enough buttons to do it. Now, the only issue is we're missing ZR and ZL, which makes it pretty much impossible, you would think, to get out to the suspend menu. However, 8BitDo did think about that. There is a way to press the home button. There's also a way to press the ZL and ZR buttons together. So to do ZL and ZR, you would press start and select at the same time, and that would kick you out, I guess, to the suspend menu in the Super Nintendo or Nintendo app. And in order to use the home button, you would press select and D-pad down. So those two together as a button combination. So they have at least designed some ways to get around kind of the lack of buttons, which again comes down to how small they wanted to make this thing. Now, the battery inside is fairly small. However, they do quote a battery life of 8 hours with a charge time of 1 to 2 hours. They do have a battery indicator light on the bottom here that will change colors as it starts to deplete. So it will go red when you need to charge it. Syncing it up to the Switch or your Windows device, or if you have a laptop or even your cell phone, isn't too bad, and they printed it on the back here. My only issue is this is probably, I think, gonna rub off over time. It's just kind of etched into the back here, but I could see that kind of disappearing over wear and tear just on the back of it. I mean, this is a $20 controller, so it's not like it's super expensive, but maybe some other way to get this on here would have been a little better. But the switch is very easy. It's just Y and then the startup button there, and it's off and running, and it's pretty easy to do. In fact, I'll grab a Switch here and we'll check it out. So my controller was already synced up, and it was very easy to do. It's just start and Y, and then it'll start to flash. You go into the controller configuration where you change grip and order, and it'll detect it, and it's off and running. It just detects it as, I believe, just a standard Pro controller. Like if I go in here and I do the L and R, or I press start, it'll start to blink, and then it will sync up here, which you'll see it kind of as like the Pro controller style, which it's not quite because it's missing a lot of stuff, but it is set up and detected in that way, at which point you can pretty much start using it completely. Now, it's missing all of the features you would see with other controllers. It has no rumble, it has no gyro, it has no NFC support. This is a very bare bones controller that, again, is designed pretty much to travel, and you can just see how, I mean, just how small this thing is. It's pretty impressive that it's actually a controller and it technically functions like completely. You can use it in a number of things. For example, how about I go into a Super Nintendo game here? We'll open this guy up and I'll jump into a game here. So I've decided to go with Super Mario World very quickly. It's a timeless game. And of course, you want a decent D-pad for it, so I thought I'd jump in here and check it out. It seems to function fine there. You know, the D-pad isn't bad. It actually has a bit of a rotation to it, so if you press down in the middle, it doesn't press all 4 parts at once. It does have a pivot in the middle, which is great, because then, of course, you don't get all these weird mispresses. However, I will say that, however, because the controller is so small, you might find your thumb just kind of covering the whole thing at times. It is, I mean, you can just see how it disappears in your hand. That is something that would take some getting used to, and I wouldn't expect this to be a controller that people would use all the time. Okay, this is not something you're gonna be like, oh, I'm at home, I'm going to go ahead and just grab the 02 controller from 8BitDo. I would assume you would have just a number of different controllers. This is something you would take with you if you knew you're going to be traveling and you just wanted an extra controller, or you just want something you could fit into your pocket, for example. This would work fine for that. And again, it does have a slot on the bottom for a keychain hook, just in case you want to even slap it on there, and if you get a little bit of downtime, maybe even with your cell phone. To be honest, this isn't a bad controller to have just for even your cell phone, just because this is something you could kind of have just at the spur of the moment, just hanging off of your keys. Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump over to the NES app, and again, in order to do that, you can press the select and down, and that'll act as their home button there, which is nice. So it's at least good that they thought of that, because if this didn't have any type of home button or anything on it, it would, I think, be unusable by itself. So while there are a number of games you just cannot play with this thing, it doesn't have any joysticks, it's missing your back buttons there, no capture button, nothing like that. You can at least, it's still usable in certain games. All right, so I went ahead and jumped into Metroid just to check it out there. And again, it works well enough. My only issue is the comfort over time. I think this is something you can use for like small spurts, I'll say that. For me, this is not a great controller for me to sit down and use for hours. I think this is definitely something you could travel with, however, and use it here and there in games like these. Like if you just want to play some Super Nintendo games or Nintendo, you could get away with this. Or maybe you're playing games on your cell phone. Like, I mean, a lot of people emulate games. A Game Boy game, a Game Boy Advance game, a Sega Genesis game, this will at least have enough buttons to do all of that. Something else I noticed is it slips around in your hand really well, which isn't good. I would like to see some sort of grippiness here, I guess, something, because this back is just, it's just this matte finish, and it just slides right off of your hand, and it's super easy to do. Like, you barely, like, it just kind of goes flying off your hand without too much issue. And that happened. I've dropped this thing several times, and I think it's just the combination of it being so small and basically nowhere to really grab it on the back. If this just had some sort of texture here, I don't know if like you know those textures where it's a bunch of dots kind of on the back, that might help it. Maybe if it was a bit more rubberized over here on the sides where you would be holding it, just some way to kind of keep it solid in your hands. Now, I did try this with a few games like Doom, for example, and it doesn't work at all. I mean, shocker, right? Yeah, so let's go ahead and we'll open this guy up now, because I am at least curious myself. I know it's a very simplistic controller, but I'm at least curious how they fit all of this in this little shell. Now, looking around this, there are no screws anywhere, like at all, so this should just be clipped together. In fact, using screws might have just made this larger, so by going with plastic clips, it probably helped them to kind of cut down on the profile around the edges. So we'll just kind of play around with it and see if I can get one of these clips to pop open. So I found that this side right here was able to separate from it. I went all the way around, starting down here, it wasn't unclipping, and then right here in this corner, it did at least start to free itself. So with that, I guess I should be able to work around here at the bottom, and then come around to this side here to hopefully free it completely. So after working around this side, it did eventually free itself, so it has completely unclipped, and we have our top shoulder buttons here, and they just pretty much attached to the bottom sides on either end, and then it looks like they just use pressure from the buttons to kind of hold themselves up. So pretty straightforward design there. And then we have our board and battery. Now the battery is 180 milliamp hours, and they do claim about 8 hours of battery life, which for this small application, I do believe it. It's not, there's not a ton going on here, like we said. And in order, again, probably to save, I assume to save the kind of the profile, make it as small as possible, probably even cheap as possible to be $20. They just went ahead and soldered the battery in, which isn't surprising. There are some screws actually in here, 4, so we have one in every corner pretty much. Oh, and then one at the top and one at the bottom there, right next to the charge port. The charge port is a position where I would assume a screw would be, just to help it and kind of solidify it a bit more, but a couple of screws here and we should be in. And with the 6 screws out, our board pops off, and it looks like they went with a rubber membrane contact pads here, and then they do have tactile press kind of push buttons here for start and select at the bottom. I actually just went ahead and turned it on, so that's good. And then we have our LED at the bottom here that does change. It has, I know, blue and red as well programmed in. And then we have our buttons here, and then our D-pad here. And they did, what's really funny is they just use a single piece of plastic to account for the start and select buttons right here. And they just kind of, looks like they just pretty much pop right out. Should be able to actually turn this upside down and get them out of there. There we go. And they just made it as one piece of plastic. So again, probably to save money and space, but pretty straightforward on that end. The buttons are not too fancy either, just sit in a certain way. You press the rubber membrane on the back, and that of course pushes down on the contacts. I'm kind of interested in the D-pad just to see Yeah, there's a nice spike right there that you can really see that guy. So they do have a very large spike in the middle there. That way you can't just press all of the buttons at once, which is good. And that's why I was saying before, you could kind of feel that in the middle when you'd press down, it wouldn't hit all of the directions at once, which is good on the 8-bit do's part for this controller. I thought the D-pad was actually decent in this. I would say it's average. I mean, for the form factor, it's great because it's so small, but I would say comparing it to other D-pads, I would say it's right in the middle. I think it is good enough to do platformers with. Fighting games should work fine as well, although again, you're going to decide how the form factor for this. But if we just grade it on just the D-pad, I think it's okay. And to finish up here, we'll get a nice look at the yellow color. So I guess if you're keeping it themed a certain way with your Switch Lite and maybe you have the yellow one, the yellow looks pretty good. I'm not a fan of the yellow Switch Lite or really just yellow in general, but I do think they did a pretty good job kind of capturing the same color. Again, the glossy front just doesn't really do it for me. But overall, the yellow and the turquoise look good. I have not seen the pink one in person, but these two colors look pretty good. And that's going to do it for the 8BitDo Zero 2 controller. I don't really recommend this as your main controller. I think it's too small. I think its use cases are a little too limited with the amount of games that it can work with, because it's missing so many buttons and functionalities. This is more of a convenience controller, one that I guess you can fit in your pocket or even on your keychain and not even really think about it too much. The 8-hour battery life isn't bad. However, I would be curious how long it would last without being used. Like in a week, would it just be dead because it was just not plugged in at some point? It's hard to say on that end, but I like 8BitDo trying new things, and I do continue to encourage them to do so. But I guess if you want a very, very small controller for travel or just for use with your phone while you're hanging out somewhere, you know, it's not bad for that reason. Just don't expect to use it for more than 30 minutes to an hour without having to kind of roll the wrist a bit. But let me know what you guys think about this guy down below. I'm very curious. Make sure you guys like the video on the way out if you enjoyed it, dislike it if not, and I'll see you next time.